something in the fire. On the highway today, there was a terrible crash. The nightly news said everyone involved had died, but I knew that before their morning segment had even broadcast that day. An upturned SUV split nearly in half, windows blown out to show crooked silhouettes inside, and the Mercedes wedged firmly to its underside. The expensive car was crumpled like a dry soda can. The pavement was replaced by a carpet of glass and steel. It was everywhere. When I slowed to lessen the crunch of debris under my tires, I thought I heard someone, but I could have imagined it. I was dialing 911. The highway was empty. Somehow, it seemed like the only two cars on the early morning road beside me had found a way to snatch tragedy from the jaws of banality. Couldn't be a coincidence. And then the sound, whoosh, and the cozy autumn coloring of dawn turned a violent orange. The Mercedes was burning. The heat of raging gasoline greeted me through my window. And now I was certain I heard someone from the SUV, a cough, or words maybe, but a call for help from beneath the carnage of twisted, dripping metal. I made sure the dispatcher on the other line knew exactly where the accident was. Just after exit 31. Hurry too, I pleaded, watching the excited flames recede into distant sparks in my rearview mirror. It don't look so good. I hung up the phone, and I prayed for them the rest of the way to work. According to the news, it appears I went unanswered. I still consider the arguments that you are probably righteously perched atop, the ones that persuaded me to take action as the Lewis house burnt to the ground, the only one there to help, the opportunity to be a hero. The right place and the right time. There's no such thing as coincidence. Now, hear this. A thesis I crafted after witnessing what became of the Lewis family. Therese, no such thing as coincidence, certainly. There's proof of that everywhere you look. But accidents. What about divine oversight? What if I was actually in the wrong place at the wrong time? What if some bad things are meant to happen? The crash, the house fire, and I was simply an extraneous variable. What if I was a field mouse that ignorantly slipped through a crack in the slaughterhouse doors as the cleavers began to swing? Jesus, what if God has no hand to play in some things? The Lewis lived in my neighborhood just round the bend. Sweet family, as nuclear as it gets, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis and their little boy and girl. The night of the fire, I woke up in my bed sweating. A little unusual, but the more I tried to fall back asleep, the stronger an irrational thought demanded my attention. Something was out of place. Hard to describe, but everything felt weird, liminal, like the feeling of an abandoned carnival, dark and defeated, refusing to act the way it was designed. I turned the LED lines of my digital clock towards me and sat up in bed. They traced an impossible number, 2063 a.m. Downstairs, I shuffled towards the kitchen, imagining how a glass of water would settle my nerves, but paused in front of the ancient grandfather clock. The clock had never seen any issues in my lifetime. But now the minute hand looped over itself, bouncing to and fro across the 12 o'clock mark. Couldn't be an electric issue then. Maybe a magnetic surge? Sometimes you hear about meteors flying too close, you know, and you get neighborhoods that end up with frizzled appliances. Except next to the clock, my mother's potted spring flowers had withered dry. I stepped outside, and the vivacious garden my mom prides upon herself cultivating every year had become a bad Halloween decoration, a graveyard of what seemed to be rotted or moldy stems. It was difficult to tell. Up and down the street, the porch lights that always provided a sense of suburban security after sundown were all snuffed out, and even the sky was empty of its usual stars and moon. When the sound of hooves echoed from down the street, I really began to question my own lucidity. Following the noise with my eyes, I could see emanating from just around the bend of the road a mild glow burgeoning against the midnight skyline of the neighborhood. Instead of recognizing this for what it was, a bad dream, and heading back inside to let the memory fade into a vague feeling of déjà vu that might hit me at a random time, I did something we can attribute to my disturbed sleep and the residual bravado left over from college. If it was a dream, I thought, perhaps it could be an adventure. These whimsies on my mind evaporated after rounding the bend when I saw the Lewis household. It wasn't engulfed yet. I would have never gone inside if it was. Instead, intelligent ribbons of fire snaked around the upper leftmost corner of the house, centralized around the window there. I watched with a stupid open mouth how the flames were spreading inward. It didn't seem interested in following the dry paneling of the house along the second floor and down the siding. Instead, it rolled over itself in ocean waves of scorching heat, holding its position. The bedroom window, surrounded by flame, was bright, and shadows flickered beyond its charred pane. Even outside, the heat stole my breath away. I was vaguely aware that my phone had been ringing longer than it should have on the emergency line with no answer. The whole time the flames remained suspended in place on the house. Then all at once, the invisible force holding it released. There was a scream, a feminine warble, and then the entire upper floor was burning. Happened so fast, like I had blinked at the perfect time. But I hadn't. I hollered, sprinting to the neighbors' doors and banging frantically, calling out to them, but their windows remained dark and silent, despite the ferocious blaze beside them. Why couldn't they hear me? Why wasn't emergency services answering? Someone had to help. There was a family still inside. Now, the reservoir of heroic daydreams overflowed and filled the front of my mind. Realizing, but not yet understanding why no help would come, I started walking, then running across the lawn, up the steps, and then into the Lewis home. I moved quickly, but some images and mental notes remain with me to this day even as I hurried through the kitchen. The temperature was cool, and the room offered a pretty assortment of hanging utensils. Family pictures pinned to the refrigerator, and a fruit bowl asserted proudly next to an electric coffee maker with a tightly wrapped cord draped over its head. Not something to nitpick over, but combined with the noticeable absence of smoke, I imagined that if I were deaf, he'd stake my credibility on there being no need for any sort of alarm inside the house presently. Although, even then I wouldn't have been able to ignore the pungent air wafting like thick cream carrying not the expected stench of smoke, but expired eggs. Guided by this stench and the screams, those wretched screams that hadn't stopped since I stepped through the door, I found the narrow stairway to the second floor. What had started as a terrible wailing had morphed and gelled into fragmented, hysterical sentences now at the bottom of the stairs. Told you I did. Therese, nothing left to number the kids. You bastard. The words didn't mean anything to me then, except that I should hurry. Not halfway up the stairs, I stopped. I saw what I thought was just a trick of the eye. There was smoke and fire occupying a great majority of the hallway upstairs, and so it was hard to see. Through the black clouds, a glowing figure walked across the landing. There were no attributes that could be discerned. Arms, legs, face. It was all moot because the thing was only fire. It wasn't some solid mass, but a writhing orgy of burning tendrils in constant movement that you could see right through, twisting amongst each other and separating, then curling and seething and joining again. Despite its constant fluctuation, it remained unmistakably in the outline of some great humanoid thing, emitting sparks and cruel pops from its form. In the brief moments before its gaping strides made it disappear further down the hall, I felt the air swell around me, like a balloon threatening to burst. It was already hotter than I ever thought possible. But the wave of heat that came from this thing, the way it branded my scalp and seared the eyebrows and lashes clean off my face in poofs of acrid smoke, it felt alive. Not a second after the figure had passed, another followed, this one with a clearer image, Mrs. Lewis. She scrambled by and was begging, "No, wait, I'm here. Use me, I'm here, use me." In 3 great leaps I cleared the stairs and crouched below the thick smoke coating the second floor. My eyes immediately flooded with salty tears. It was hard to keep them open. Mrs. Lewis was standing in front of an open doorway at the end of the hall. I tried to call out to her, but I coughed instead. She wouldn't move. Mrs. Lewis. I hacked through the heat. The low visibility of the hallway was disorienting, and the heat made it near impossible to move. Mrs. Lewis remained in front of the doorway, not even a twitch in my direction. I called out again, this time frantic and horrified, as I watched fire catch the ends of her blouse and quickly eat its way up the fine silk cloth. I inched forward. "Mrs. Lewis, I can grab the kids. The fire! You're on fire!" Still, Mrs. Lewis stood gazing into the room. With slow mechanical movement, her hands went over her head and gathered clumps of hair in tight vice-like grips, and with agonizing force began to tear it from her scalp. Knotted tangles of hair dropped to her feet, quickly devoured by the flames surrounding her. I wished that she would have flinched or grimaced, or at least shrieked when the flesh on her legs dripped like viscous wax, bubbling and pooling around her heels. I wished she at least screamed instead of moaned like she did. Her eyes bulged like she was being squeezed, and her mouth was open, and she moaned. She was a chorus of insanity, the moan of a child witnessing their dog struck by a car, the last shreds of hope escaping a husband beside his cancer-rotted wife, the mania of a mother lowering a miniature casket into the ground. Mrs. Lewis was all of these and more, yanking, tearing, ripping, until the last strand was wrenched from her cranium, and only flames danced atop her exposed skull. Her hands fell to her sides. Her charred, hairless head lowered, and she marched thoughtlessly into the room. The door shut behind her, and then the flames hiccuped, and the world exploded. I woke up to a silent black sky behind a floating curtain of smoke. I was outside in someone's arms. It took a few seconds, blinking and squinting, before I could study my savior, and even longer before a confused recognition struck me. How could this be? He's hairless. It's all gone. The beautiful silver locks atop his head, the sculpted facial hair, and the dark eyebrows that made even the college girls struggle to hold eye contact. The distinguishing aqua blue irises were beady mole pupils now, desperately searching this way and that, and then back to the blaze consuming his house. No longer charming, intelligent, witty in shape and cool, but now pathetic and naked. His skin sagged and his arms shook, carrying my weight. He gasped, abrupt wheezes of air through his dry mouth, decorated by a single rotten tooth left over from the flashy white smile he was so proud of. Mr. Lewis staggered across his yard, following our long shadows away from the crumbling house. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear. When the ringing in my ears finally quieted, I was beginning to catch tidbits of what Mr. Lewis was saying. Forgive me my trespasses like I forgive the trespassers against me. Oh, John, and lead me away. From temptation, deliver me from evil. John, you can't even get the words right. Would you like me to finish them? For thine is the kingdom. You have chosen your kingdom, the power, the glory, forever. Amen. I tumbled to the grass as Lewis collapsed to his knees. Those words, they weren't the product of warm air pushed through vocal cords. They were just simply there, dense, brought about by the impenetrable smoke. They hurt my ears and echoed like they came from the depths of a cave. They held my eyes closed and forced me to listen. Lewis sounded like a child who'd lost a card game. Indignant, beaten, he said, I have given you far more than you've asked. Do you offer him as well? Will it help? Will he satisfy you? A pressure on my neck bore down on me, cutting off the air. I offered my own silent prayers to any deity aware of me. It is your name, John Lewis, that is on my list. Those who sought barter with the abyss know of a price etched in blood. We will take your bribes and still collect on your debt. You have damned your blood of your own accord, and your prescribed suffering only increases. They wait screaming for you in the furnace. The pressure disappeared. I watched through slits in my eyes. Poor Lewis rose to his feet. He wandered towards his house, towards a living fire that ate his home. Something waited for him on the doorstep, wrapped in flames. Something draped in hooks and chains, blowing black smoke from its nostrils and drooling lava from its pointed teeth. They stepped through the door together, and behind them it shut. Not a floorboard nor a scrap of drywall remained. Somehow no one noticed the destruction of the Lewis home until it was a smoldering heap in the brown grass. The happy family that brought baked mac and cheese to the monthly block party and extra folding chairs to the Park District soccer games just in case were already fading memories now. The neighborhood rehearsed, huddled in their church masses, and during the little chats they stopped to have while they walked their dogs. Oh, a tragedy, all right, they moaned, shaking their chins and rubbing their foreheads. And the kids, too, didn't deserve it any more than the rest of us. But everyone seemed to be a little looser around the joints. Old Miss Fay, a house over from the Lewis, had never enjoyed her neighbors and became isolated after her cat had turned up skinned and drained, hanging by its tail from a tree. Shed accused the Lewis. Said Shed heard the strange languages they sang in after sunset. No one believed her, of course. The Lewis had what every family in the neighborhood wanted. A week ago there was a beautiful family absent of jealousy or internal strife, a freshly waxed Porsche in the driveway, and the admiration of the community. Now? Well now, Miss Fay hummed and poured water over freshly planted lilies. My mother had just finished redesigning her own new garden. The smoke I inhaled scarred my lungs. After that day, I no longer feel like a young man anymore, much less act like one. I feel like the mouse. Be wary, saving those who are drowning lest you find yourself at the bottom of the ocean with them.